back to another video here on Free Will Photos, and today we're going to be talking about the features or some updates that I would like to see in the 2024 release of the software. Now, before we go too far into that content, I do want to say thank you to the team over at ON1 because they sent out this shirt, which, is awesome. But the reason they sent it is because of the content that I create. And, I want to say thank you to the viewers, the subscribers, and everyone who supports this channel. Because as you support this channel and help me bring awareness to ON1, it one, helps the product grow, but two, builds a community. And I really do appreciate that. And I wouldn't have this shirt without you guys. So I do want to say thank you to you guys. Now, I want to be very clear. I have not talked to ON1 about any of the things I'm going to be sharing with you today. I have no insider information. This is all purely my opinion and my thought, and I want it to be received as just that. Now, I would love to hear your opinions and thoughts on the things that I'm suggesting in the comment section below, but there's actually a better place for you to put your comments and your thoughts. And that's on the ON1 Photo Raw project website. Check the description box below. I'll have links to all of the threads that I initiate based off of the topics I cover in this video, which I'm not going to cover everything. I'm going to cover 4 quality of life updates that I would like to see in the software, and then 1 new feature. And that'll be the trend over the next couple of videos that I produce on this, because I think that there's some value in not dropping everything all at once, right? But I also have to think through how I want to share those things and articulate what it is that I would like to see in the software, as opposed to just saying, give me this. If you're not familiar, this is the website for the ON1 Photo Raw project. You can get to it by going to the ON1 website, and then down at the very bottom, there is a Photo Raw project. Now, what's unique about this particular website is you have to be a member or a owner of ON1, no matter which version you have, to get access to this site. So this is literally the community of users in ON1 or using ON1 that are requesting features to be added to the software or things to be corrected in the software, modified, things of that sort. So if you haven't been to this website, I highly have to recommend that you go over there and leave your comments about things that you would like to see, and use the comment section of this video to share the URL to the thing that you would like to see updated. And if other people agree, then they can click on it and go and upvote that so it gets the attention of the developers. Now let's go ahead and dive into the content of the quality of life updates that I would like to see. So here we are inside of the computer, and I have a curves filter pulled up. Now, with the latest release, 2023.5, we got deletable nodes as well as a histogram in the curves filter. But notice how small the working space of the filter is compared to everything else that moves and modifies with the user interface. If I drag this over to the left or the right, and my screen has to refresh. That's not a ON1 issue. That's just the way that my computer works. But what you'll notice here is this doesn't actually resize, but everything else does resize. And if I wanted to squish this down really, really tiny, even these buttons resize. What I would like to see is that this working space can either be zoomed into, so add in a zoom feature here if they cannot resize the working space, or as you drag out your panels on the right hand side, the curves module will actually expand as well. That would be extremely helpful, mostly because the nodes that we use on the curves module are larger than the little squares that help you with modifying your incremental adjustments. Now, if you completely just ignore those smaller squares and you use the larger squares, I think you'll be okay. But they're there for a reason. So either get rid of the little squares or give us a resized working space, because I think that will greatly improve the usability of this tool. It's still in its current state. It's a very usable tool, and I love the updates that they've made to it. I would just like to see that expand just a little bit more. The next thing that I want to talk about is something that has confused me for a little while. I want to say since the 2020 release, maybe 2021, I can't remember, but I guess my confusion comes in with the masking options that are available. Currently, you can use either the mask or the local adjustment masking options to modify an image. Now, when you click on local, it brings you to the local adjustment tab. However, if I click mask, I stay on the local adjustment tab, which makes sense, but I can still use all of the masking tools that are available, which I have way more masking tools available here. What I don't understand, and where my confusion comes in, is why do we have two separate modification tabs or masking option sets? There should just be one, in my opinion. And I think that the mask option set is the more superior version, if you will, because it has more capabilities than the local tab. Now, this isn't a huge issue other than the fact that it would streamline the software, because knowing that I can use the mask tools to add in my local adjustment, I want to say like 99.9% time, I just use the masking tools, because I like to use the line masking tool with my local adjustments. I like to use the OG quick mask tool, which is one of those things that I still use to this day. The point is, if you're a new member or a new user to the ON1 suite, it may be a little confusing because you wouldn't even know that you have these tools available to you if you're just getting started, as opposed to making one masking option or location, and then everyone will have access to the mask, the masking bug, the new AI masking tools, as well as the old school auto masking tool or quick mask tool, and then the line mask tool. You'll have all of those available to you, and it wouldn't be a mystery of, could I use this in the local adjustment? So that's what I would like to see. The other thing that I would like to see combined as a like item is really just cleaning up the effects menu here, or the filters menu. The reason why I say that is I get a lot of questions about, should I use the color enhancer or should I use the color adjustment? And 9 times out of 10, I tell everyone just use the color enhancer, especially if you're working inside of ON1 Photo Raw desktop application and you never touch mobile. The only time that I tell people to add a color adjustment is if they're using the mobile app. And the reason for that is if you use a color enhancer and then you try to open that on the mobile app, it's not going to work. So I always recommend that if you're going to use the mobile app, then yes, go with the color adjustment. But other than that, always grab the color enhancer. Some other effects that would be helpful is getting the noise reduction removed from here, because we have no noise AI. And the only benefit to having noise reduction built into the filters or the effects is for the masking capability. One of the most requested features for the no noise AI is that we would be able to mask it into the places where we would like to remove the noise. Because truthfully, there's some places where we would like to remove noise, and then there's other places where we want to leave the noise intact because it adds to the image. So as the users of the program, I think we're asking for the flexibility to choose where we put the noise as opposed to having it go over the entire image. Now, the workaround is you would have to create a layer, and then that creates a .on1 photo file, which is a larger file. If you just want to do a simple reduction, why do I have to, or I'm sorry, a simple edit, why would I need to create this larger file in order to do so when if I wanted to use no noise AI across the entire image, I wouldn't have to do that. So my recommendation here, and again, this isn't a new feature, this is just how we move the features that are already in ON1 to make the program a little bit more streamlined, is instead of having the no noise AI under the develop module, which by default has no masking capabilities whatsoever, instead of it being down here, make it its own module along the top here. So right next to portrait, make it say no noise AI or noise and sharpening. And then we would have the capability to mask just like we can with portrait and sky. Like these other 4 tabs here, they allow us to mask. And, you know, let me know in the comment section below if I'm onto something here. But if you are using ON1, most of the time you're spending inside of one of these 4 tabs. So I think that it would be a good move for us to have no noise AI and sharpening and all that on its own tab. So then we can mask it in where we would like it to be. And you don't have to get too involved with using layers, which can be confusing and off-putting for a new user. And ON1 is supposed to be one of those programs that a beginner or hobbyist photographer can just turn on and start editing photos and get going pretty quickly. And the last effect that I would recommend that gets consolidated or removed is we have 2 blurs inside of this filter library, if you will. And I don't believe that there's a need for both of the blurs. Let's go ahead and open those up. We'll take a quick look at them. The blur module is a very basic blur. It goes all over the image, and I get why that's there, right? You have 4 different or 5 different modes, if you will, and that makes sense. But we also have the lens blur, and what I would recommend is we take the lens blur and we combine it into the type here. So instead of 5 different types, you have a 6th type that just says lens blur, and it brings up all of the lens blur options. The reason I suggest this is because we've already got, if I come to motion blur, it already changes the adjustments and the filters that we have available. With the lens blur, there's no on-screen controls. So there's, to me, you know, I'm not a developer, but if I were streamlining a software, I would take these tools or these sliders and just combine it as a type inside of the blur gallery or the blur filter. And you could rename that to blur gallery or something like blur studio. I don't know. You could change it to whatever you want. Comment down below what you would like to see that renamed to, or for all I care, it could stay as blur. I think it would just help clean up some of the excess things that are in here and help minimize the confusion for new users, because that is also another question that I get, not as often, but still a question that I get in my email or on comments where people are saying, hey, which blur should I be using? Should I use the lens blur or should I use the regular blur? And what's the difference and all those things? But that's what I would like to see consolidated. The color adjustment and color enhancer, the blur features, and then consolidating the noise reduction, removing it from here altogether and turning that into its own tab. I think that those would be great quality of life adjustments and updates. So the final quality of life item I would like to see updated before I reveal the feature I would like to see in the later release is improved compound masking. We need improved compound masking. If you're not familiar with how compound masking works, let me just show you a very simple thing. What I want to do is I want to highlight this area. So I'm just going to make my brush a little bit bigger. And then I also want to highlight this area. Well, I can do it with no problems using a brush tool. However, if I wanted to use one of the masking bugs, so we'll just go ahead and reset that. And then I'll come over here to the masking bug and I'll grab the vignette tool. Put that right here on the center. And then if I click add, now I can put this right over the top here. But what I'm actually doing is just cutting holes into the mask. So if I invert this, then I get the desired effect that I want, but that just seems cumbersome to me. And if you are confused with what I'm explaining to you and you just watch me do it, then that is the reason why I'm suggesting that instead of having to invert everything, because right now the effect of increased exposure is over the entire image, and I'm just cutting out a hole to block that area. So essentially I'm putting a black card over those areas so the exposure effect doesn't shine through in that area. And so essentially every time that I add one of these, that's exactly what's happening. And when I come back to the photo, you can see that it works that way. Well, if I hit invert, then I get the opposite of that, where the only things that are shining through are in these little areas. This works, but it's confusing. Instead, what I would recommend is they take the approach of Lightroom, where by default, whenever you put a vignette tool or a radial mask, I should say, on an image, it should not invert your mask. Instead, and I'll show you with the using edges, instead, what it should do is by default, add in whatever you need on the inside of your mask. And if you need to invert it, then you can do so by hitting the invert button. Because when I click add here, for some reason, it wants to remove it. And that doesn't make sense because it's on the exact same setting of edges. And I would like to see that modified internal to the radial mask. Now, again, if this is confusing, it's just as confusing to me trying to explain why something doesn't work the way that you would expect it to. Other than the fact that if I were to use center and put one down and then put another one down and put another and resize them, and then I can invert, that seems to work, but I'm not sure why that works that way and not the other way. So let me know in the comment section if that makes sense. All right, so now it's time to reveal the feature that I would love to see inside of ON1 2024, or at least some future release of ON1. And that is a gradient map. This is something that already exists in other programs like Affinity Photo, Photoshop, even to some degree, Lightroom. And I think that it would be a huge add or benefit to seeing that here inside of ON1. Now, let me just turn off this local adjustment. And here you see 3 effects here, and these are all photo filters. I've shown videos in the past of how I've made a workaround to creating a gradient map where I take a photo filter, I go into the gear icon here, and I do the apply to, put it on the shadows, and then you have to work the range to make it make sense, but then you have the ability to put a color into that tonal range. And I've done this 3 times over, so I have a shadows, midtones, and highlights. If there was only one tool where I could do a gradient map, that would make things a lot easier, and I think a lot of people would appreciate that. So my idea of where and how this could be implemented is in one of 2 ways. The first one, I think the easiest way, is inside of the color balance tool, because inside of the color balance tool, we already have these 3 tabs: highlights, midtones, and shadows. But the only way that you can add a color into those areas is by dragging this little dot, and I'll pull up the amount so that way we can see it. This is the only way that I can add color. And to me, this is not a very precise method, especially if you have a hex code or something where you know the specific color that you want to add to your image. You can't do that this way, because if I click on this little box, which all of the other boxes inside of ON1, you could click, choose a color, put a hex code, do all these other things. But for some reason, in this particular one, you cannot. And that just blows my mind. I'm not sure why you can't do that. But then you can click through, and I'll just do a really quick grade here. Nothing over serious. But the challenge that I have with this particular one is I can't specify the range of where the shadows, the midtones, and highlights are like I can with my workaround. So what my recommendation here is for the new feature is you could leave color balance if you want to. I personally don't find any value in color balance, so I think we could reshape the color balance filter into the color grade filter or gradient map filter, and allow users to put multiple nodes across the top here, similar to a curves filter with selectable color ranges. And then for each one of those nodes, you give them a range tool. So that way you can slide, or even better, as you slide the node around on top of the gradient map, similar to what we have in other programs, then that tells us how far to spread that color in between the next color. I think that that will be well received. Now, that's the primary way that I think this could be revamped into a gradient map tool. The other option is taking the split tone and allowing users to add more split tone options, and specifically putting them into highlights or giving them the window tool here, which you can only get when you're on a range tool. So again, the gradient map is a range, so giving a window option. Now, this will feed into a more advanced feature that I'll request in a later video, but essentially this would be our method of adding something. If we get the window feature, and I'm just going to turn this off, add it to the highlight, shadows, midtones, and we can add multiple nodes in between. Now, how many nodes do you really need for a gradient map? I would say if we have 5 in either the split tone option, or if we get 5 nodes inside of the color balance option, that will absolutely be enough to get started. And I think for the people who would use this particular feature, that would be good enough. Could we be greedy and ask for more? Sure. But I think 5, if you're doing more than 5 colors in an image, you may have something more dramatic going on that maybe ON1 isn't the tool you should be using. Just my opinion, but take that for what it's worth. So let me know in the comment section below if that would be the gradient map option you would like. Again, check the description box to hit the links to all of the things that I talked about. If you give it an upvote, it just gets more attention over on the Photo Raw project. And then I would love to see in the comment section the links to your own ideas of what you would like to see in ON1. Stay tuned for more videos about the future release of ON1 2024, because I do have a long list of items. If you got questions, then you already know, leave them in the comment section as well, and I'll get back to you. But with all of that said, if you found value, smash the like button, hit subscribe so you can join the family here on Free Will Photos. And until the next time, I want you to stay inspired and keep creating. Peace.